Pittsburgh Steelers fans, welcome back to another episode. Oh no, I messed up. My bad, y'all. My bad. Welcome back to another episode of the Hangover on the Steel Curtain Network, part of Fans First Sports Network. Alongside with me is Shannon White. I'm your host, Daniel J. Shannon, how you doing today?
I'm doing awesome. We do that all the time. Me and GB did that, played the music twice Wednesday night on the curtain call. And like I said, when the music's that nice, you got to play it twice.
You know it, man. And speaking of playing nice, and not well, the Pittsburgh Steelers, I guess, are now going to be looking for a new strong safety. Terrell Edmonds signed elsewhere, 1-year deal, $2 million. I mean, I guess the Steelers weren't playing so nice in that situation when it came to acquiring or reacquiring Terrell Edmonds. How surprised are you at the details of the contract that he ended up getting?
I'm just really shocked. I was blown away, to be honest with you. Terrell Edmonds is not spectacular. He's not Pro Bowl. You know, yes, he was overdrafted, but the truth is Terrell Edmonds is a solid player who fits the Pittsburgh Steelers very well. And he was a great worked in tandem with Minkah Fitzpatrick. He played like a box linebacker who could actually, Steelers had a great weakness covering tight ends for years before Edmonds come in. Edmonds come in, and now even if a tight end had a big first half, they switched Edmonds on him in the second half, and nobody lit him up like happened prior to his arrival. I thought he was well worth a 3-year contract, anywhere from $9 to $12 million, to make him feel, like they wanted him around and respected and give him some job security. I thought it was a no-brainer. I did not think it was going to be a problem because I knew that he wasn't highly valued around the league. He has more value in the Steel City. But for some reason, and I think he got to be a pissing contest. And a lot of times when you get in a pissing contest with two real stubborn entities, and I think Edmonds is stubborn, and I know the Steelers are stubborn, and then in the end, nobody wins because Edmonds signs for $2 million with the Eagles, and the Steelers now got to find a strong safety because, contrary to popular belief, Devontae Kazee is not a strong safety. He is a great deep safety. Now, when he played last year when Edmonds was out, Fitzpatrick played strong safety. But Fitzpatrick is a ball hawk and more of a natural free safety. Just because he can do one doesn't mean he should. And I don't think that you're limited in his effectiveness if you put him in strong safety full time. So I'd like to see the Steelers address it in free agency. There's a couple of guys that you can bring in with experience. And then also, if somebody falls that you like in the draft, and there's going to be a few guys in the 3rd or 4th round that might fit what they're looking for. Because, again, it's not that Edmonds is impossible to replace, but you got a guy who was solid, who was a good teammate, who was durable, and he would have been cheap. So that one, it had to just be both sides just decided we're not going to negotiate together anymore.
Right. No, I agree. I was equally as surprised when I found out that he was going elsewhere. I thought the Pittsburgh Steelers were going to re-sign him. I thought he was going to be a priority free agent for the most part. I saw what the Steelers were without him last year for a couple of games, and to me, I don't feel like we have a strong safety on the roster currently. So that is something that now the Steelers are going to have to tip their hand a little bit, especially if they don't acquire one ahead of the draft in free agency. Then I guess all eyes will be at the draft, and that priority might be climbing up. One of the biggest issues or biggest takes against Terrell Edmonds coming into, as Pittsburgh Steeler for the first few years was the fact that the Steelers reached for him in the first round. I'm not seeing a Minkah Fitzpatrick type or Polamalu type of safety in this draft. If they go and pick one at 17, which I think a lot of people are pointing at Branch out of Alabama, do you think that he's going to fall under that same stigma of being a reach?
They could very well happen. Branch is an undersized, flexible defensive back, and that he can play the slot very well against most competition. And that's why he's a smart player. He has a little bit of the Fitzpatrick instincts, And I think the teams will look at him for that. But I think 17 is too early for him. And he really doesn't fit what the Steelers need as a box safety. And that's why I have an article, the second part of my two-part series on how the Steelers can upgrade the inside linebacker position. First part, early February, was about free agency. I've got one submitted now, and it's waiting to post, and it's about the draft class. And what I'm afraid is going to happen, if you look at Edmonds, he was a box safety who played like a coverage linebacker with flexibility. He gave them that position flexibility. That's why the 3 safety look was so effective late in the season. Well, I'm afraid what the Steelers are going to do is they're going to try to replace Edmonds' production and impact on the defense with a inside linebacker, a max-style movement inside linebacker who could mirror a lot of the things that Edmonds did. Let's say Trenton Simpson out of Clemson. A guy, who a lot of evaluators are saying maybe ought to switch to safety because he's like Bush. He's really bad engaging and disengaging blockers, but he's excellent at coverage. He can run with wide receivers. I'm thinking if you see Tomlin at Clemson's pro day, he was drooling all over the kid. I think he's infatuated with him, and that's who he wants. He looked at Najee Harris, the same way.
Mm-hmm.
When, he went and watched Harris. I'm afraid that we're getting ready to see the Steelers miss out on the best off-ball linebacker in this draft for a guy who fits what they consider their need right now and their wants, which is a sideline-to-sideline movement linebacker to kind of minimize the loss of Edmonds. That scares me.
Understood. And so currently, Mike Tomlin came out a little bit earlier. He was talking about the safety position and what they can do. And he talked about Patrick Peterson being a possible option, an option that he has already spoken to him probably prior to signing. So when you hear that they're thinking about moving Patrick Peterson to the safety in certain positions, and they're talking to him prior to signing him, that kind of leads you to believe that the Steelers had no indication of signing Terrell Edmonds, that they had this plan already, and they probably have a plan for somebody else coming in. But you're right, the Steelers don't have a strong safety. There's some options that are out there that you just mentioned in the draft. And what about free agency? Is there a guy that you see the Steelers can pick up in free agency that can bring in?
Well, one thing I wanted to mention with you bringing up Peterson,
right?
Rod Woodson,
mm-hmm.
Charles Woodson, some of the top, cornerbacks in NFL history to lengthen their career and their effectiveness, do safety, or occasionally play safety for positional flexibility and increase their value. I had not thought of that until Tomlin mentioned it. And then I'm like, wow, I mean, that could actually, extend his effectiveness and help with the issue the Steelers have at the moment. But because if they do that, they definitely got to get another cornerback.
Right.
If Peterson's going to be playing much safety. As far as anybody in free agency, there's Taylor Rapp. And I think he's still with the Rams, or he was with the Rams. When he was coming out, it's funny, when the Steelers show interest in a guy during the draft process, even if they don't get him, it seems like they're always kind of on that radar because they built a relationship with Tomlin and everything. And the Steelers had interest in Rapp when he was out there in the draft class. So that's a guy you can bring in. Obviously, none of the safeties are going to cost much right now.
Right.
I think you need a veteran security blanket, an insurance policy in case whoever they might be targeting in the draft. Like some people have been talking about not Branch, but Battle. That's the strong safety from Alabama. And he's more of a box safety and more like Edmonds. And a lot of people's talking about him maybe in the 4th round. But what if somebody else has that same plan against you before you? The Steelers cannot go into this season as they're currently constructed at safety, in my opinion. Norwood is not an NFL. He's a spot specialty package guy, but he cannot be counted on. And Killebrew is really a great special teamer, and I like him, but I don't want him out there and starting either if there's an injury. So I think they can look at a guy like Rapp, or I think the guy's name was Johnson that was with Cleveland last year.
Mm-hmm.
He's still out there. Either one of them guys would be somebody that you could bring in who's a proven production and kind of give you a little security there.
I agree. My only concern is, or my only question is, don't you think you'd get a little bit more security by signing an Edmonds for $2 million? Is somebody that knows the defense. I mean, you're going to bring in these guys; they're going to be cheap, but are they going to be $2 million or less cheap? I mean, I think that's pretty much the bare minimum of what you're going to be paying for. Yeah. So you're bringing in a body just to change something, and so it brings and dawns on the question. Was Terrell Edmonds really at the end of his tenure with the Pittsburgh Steelers Mike Tomlin's guy, or was he maybe perhaps a Brian Flores guy who wanted to use a 3 safety set and utilize him in that as the guy to come down? And they had already moved on from him as a coverage safety with the acquisition of DeMonte KZ last year. Unfortunately, he ends up getting hurt, and so things end up going awry. Change of plans. Edmonds is back up at the top for the majority of the season. That just kind of dawned on me here recently. Do you think that's a possibility of where this went? And if so, then that would probably lead us to believe that they're going to try to change KZ to a strong safety.
I don't see KZ as a strong safety. We talked a little bit about it last year when they picked him up. Mm-hmm. He's got excellent range. He's a ball hawk. He is very good deep safety. Mm-hmm. And he can take away over half the field. But I do not see him. He was way more physical with the Steelers, by the way, than I'd ever seen him in Atlanta or Dallas. He was really physical, and he come up really laid some licks on people. But you remember what happened? He got hurt. He's undersized for that style. If he comes up and tries to lay a lick on somebody consistently, especially larger tight ends, and in the running game, I think he will get hurt again. So that's why I thought that's why they used Fitzpatrick more in the strong safety role when Edmonds was out. And, thankfully Edmonds didn't miss much. So there's another thing they're going to miss is how durable Terrell Edmonds was and reliable. And, sometimes just reliability is one of your best abilities because you're always there, and he was. So I'm still shaking my head at that one. I'm not happy with it. I think it was a mistake, and I think egos got involved, and a lot of times nothing good happens when that happens.
No, I agree. I wouldn't even have been surprised if Edmonds got a matching offer from the Pittsburgh Steelers to stay, but he chose to go to Philadelphia, understanding that he was not going to get any other offers until he got a chance to be in the spotlight, so to speak. I think he's kind of living in Fitzpatrick's shadow a little bit, and not coming up with those big interceptions. Having the hands that he has. I think he had to move somewhere else to show that he is a solid player and a valuable player. And perhaps maybe he's thinking that, the Eagles will then turn that 1-year deal into a long-term deal for him versus the Steelers continually giving him a 1-year deal. Mm-hmm. And so that's just kind of my thought plan there with him. Now, the title of the show is, the Steelers don't hide their hand. And where I was going with that is, all right, so we were thinking that they were probably going to go cornerback. However, Joey Porter Jr., Mike Tomlin, Omar Khan, no-shows. What are your thoughts there? Do you think that they've maybe perhaps not even targeting cornerback in the first round? I thought that was probably their biggest need. Going into this draft, to be honest with you, looking at the last few drafts and how offensive heavy they've been, I thought defense was going to be for sure the answer. Tomlin's eating with the offensive lineman with Ohio State, missing Joey Porter Jr.'s pro day. Maybe we got this backwards. What are you thinking?
Yeah, I agree. I thought this was the year that defense was addressed. The Steelers' defense is much older than the offense. The offense is all 28 or younger, and they really have a lot of potential there. So I figured, say, 7 picks, 5 picks on the defense. That's what I was kind of expecting. I'm like you. I've been shocked with where it seems like a lot of their attention is going, because I think now I like the interior of the Steelers' offensive line and the depth right now. I think that they can upgrade tackle or at least bring in a young offensive tackle to be the eventual upgrade and starter. But to me, all the needs on the defensive side that are glaring, defensive line, they got to get some big bodies inside. I mean, you can't have Martavius Adams and Loudermilk as your two top defensive tackles. That just isn't going to cut it. Even if they do use a lot of the just with Hayward and Ogunjobi is the only two defensive linemen. Sometimes you got to go goal line, you got to go big package, and they need some beef in there, and they need an upgrade. Now, there's a lot of guys people are talking about that might be a possibility inside, but they're going to have to look at some guys in this draft. Maisie Smith from Michigan and Breezy from Clemson and, Garrett. There's different guys out there that I think would fit what the Steelers need. And they like tall, rangy guys in the interior, not necessarily 350 pounders.
Mm-hmm.
But, I thought for sure by now in free agency they would have made a move on somebody. But they haven't yet. So they got a plan. I don't even sure what it is. But I think that they need to look inside linebacker to get a young guy. And there's a couple of guys that, like I said, I think will be really intriguing, but we'll just have to see what happens, in that second round, because, they're going to have a couple of picks there. Right. I think they can really bring in somebody that could be to solidify that. We don't want to have to think about it anymore for a good while, because they brought in Landon Roberts and they got Cole Holcomb. I think they've upgraded their physicality, the everything on that, inside linebacker position. But cornerback just stands to reason based on who they have and the ages of Peterson and Wallace that they would want to get young and get a guy that Peterson can kind of mentor.
Right.
But the guys that everybody's talking about are either not going to be there because, they're going to be a run on probably the top three. Mm-hmm. And I'm not as sold on Joey Porter Jr. as some people. And they had the article today for the kid from Maryland.
Mm-hmm.
And I really like his makeup. I mean, he's only had 1 year of elite level play in college. But I do like his makeup, his speed, his competitiveness. He's got some dog in him.
Right.
And I think that, where he won't have to be a starter immediately, I think that could be a guy that the Steelers could look at. But, yeah, I'm like you. I thought that based on where they're going for their pro days and in the visit, it's not screaming, we're going to take a early corner.
Right, exactly. And then, I guess when you look at the acquisition of Patrick Peterson, right, he's a veteran guy. He's a guy also that we find out later that's going to be moving in and out from cornerback to safety, depending on packages. He's a guy that is known to be a mentor, was a mentor in Minnesota and taught the young cornerbacks around him. I guess we could believe at that point that maybe perhaps the Pittsburgh Steelers in a draft that is known to be a little bit deep in cornerback, perhaps, taking one that needs a little bit of help, a little bit of mentoring, and bring them in, like you said, slowly. And they can bring them in those certain packages where Patrick is moving to the strong safety position, leaving that cornerback position open. So thus, instead of having this guy picked in the second, third round, thrown in as a starter, he's learning bits and pieces of the playbook as you go, plus being mentored by a future Hall of Fame cornerback doesn't hurt. I think that's probably going to be the outlook there. Going offensive tackle in the first round in 17, I'm not too surprised. This team has, when you look at, I think it was PFF, they had a graph out there. I think there was only two teams, and it was the Vegas Raiders and the Miami Dolphins, that protected their tackles more than the Pittsburgh Steelers, meaning that they used either a tight end or a second offensive tackle to come in to help protect them the outside. And when you look at what the Eagles were doing, they were the team that left their tackles on an island more than anyone. And so you bring in an Andy Weidl, I assume that you're going to want to make the offensive line, especially a guy that's built an offensive line that has become as great as they did, to kind of mirror that same image. And I don't think you have the personnel in there with Dan Moore and Chicks Corford to allow to leave them on an island that often, right? That's going to get Pickett killed. And so, I'm starting not to be surprised by how the Steelers are making up this offensive line and the way they're going. Do you think that the tackle that they grab in the first, if they go that route and they grab a tackle in the first round, who do you think is the odd man out there, Chooks or Dan Moore? And do you think maybe if, let's just say it's Chooks that's out, you think they get a left tackle and move Dan to the right?
It would depend on who they get if they draft. If they get a guy who's predominantly, a left tackle, this is the guy's future is going to be a left tackle, and they might want to try him out originally playing left tackle, then I think, Moore would probably be better on the right side. Moore struggles with the speed, but he's better against power. And Okorafor has the longer arms, and I always thought Okorafor should stay on the left side. Well, the Steelers have him flipped because Okorafor really looked bad when they've had him on the left side. But again, you've seen a shift in philosophy with Okorafor last year. There was times that he was walking after the whistle, through the whistle. There was some shoving going on. There was some more aggressiveness. He was getting a little pissed off. Now, if you remember, Okorafor, he's from Sudan or wherever originally, and he hadn't been in the States that long, and he's kind of a more laid-back, passy personality. But you started to see a little bit of meanness, a little bit of nasty in his game last year. And I think his confidence grew, and he had his best season. I think that his confidence is and his technique is at a point now that he can easily compete on the left side. And say the Steelers go DeJuan Jones from Ohio State, who's a massive human being, but actually moves better than people realize for a guy his size. And he has a lot of Orlando Brown Jr. in him. If they get him, put him on that right side, they'd have a power side for sure. And then let Okorafor and Moore man the left tackle spot, because Moore would be a very good swing tackle. I really believe that because I think he can play the right side. But I do think they need an upgrade at tackle, either or, and it'll depend on who's available.
Right. No, I agree. My thoughts are that they're going to go after a left tackle and perhaps move Dan Moore to the right and save some money by cutting Chooks Okorafor, because I think there's some cap savings if you let him go. I'm not the cap guy. That's Dave Schofield's department. But from what I understand, I'm pretty sure that there's some cap savings there, letting him go. And I think that, you don't make that move until after the draft and you figure out what you have. You know what I'm saying? And so,
who's your target? Because to me, there's only three guys in the left side, that can be a starter this year. And that's Jones, Broderick Jones, and Paris Johnson, and Skoronski. Those three guys, I think, but eventually they want to move Ski inside. Everybody keeps saying he'll want to be a guard. But of those three guys, I think they could be an upgrade at left tackle. The rest of the guys are predominantly right tackles. So if they go left, which one, if one of them's there, which one would you like?
So I've put it out there. I thought the Steelers were going to double dip in Georgia and go with Broderick Jones and then Ringo at cornerback at number 32. If he's still there, I think he is very similar to Patrick Peterson, so he would be a good person to learn from. But I think that Broderick Jones is the guy that I had chosen at the left tackle position. He's physical. He's large. He's a big guy. I mean, when you look at who Andy Weidel is also selecting, he picks nasty, big, when you look at what he's done with the Eagles as far as their linemen go, and so far what he's done with the Steelers, he's brought the guys that he signed before. And so I think that's the direction that we're going to go. I think if you see somebody that is extremely large, they're probably on the Steelers' radar.
But that's DeJuan Jones.
Yeah. No,
you're
right.
The dude's massive. I mean, he really is. And And that we know that Weidl likes that kind of guy in Philly.
Yeah.
And but you was talking about Jones, Broderick Jones from Georgia. That kid is very athletic.
Yeah.
I mean, he really is.
Yeah, and he's athletic and he's nasty, right?
Yeah.
He's the guy that threw the the coach, the Steelers coach during the combine, right? Yeah. And so I saw that and I was like, man, that kind of sounds good for a player. You know, I want a guy that's going to be like that. You know, no hard feelings to the coach on the ground, but and I know he was the Steelers coach too.
Yeah, he was,
so you know, he got firsthand knowledge of how nasty he can be, and so you know, that was the guy that I was looking at. But you're right, the guy that you're bringing up, he's a massive guy. I think that's the guys that the Steelers are going to be looking for. They're going to be targeting large human beings that give, you know, that make the opposition have to run or move extra to get around. Right, that buys a little bit of time. Plus, if you get somebody who's freakishly athletic at that size, I mean, you can't get any better than that, right?
No.
And so we're going to take a quick break real quick. Don't go anywhere. We'll be right back in about 5 seconds. On the YouTube side, just hang tight. And welcome back, everybody, to the Hangover. Today, we're talking about the Steelers. We're talking about, you know, how they don't hide their hand. But before we move forward, not to turn into weak Purple Drapes Network, what were your thoughts about Lamar Jackson? Him wanting a trade, it does affect the Steelers in a sort of a way as far as he is the competition. What are your thoughts? You think we've seen the last of Lamar Jackson in Baltimore?
That is far from the ideal situation going on in Baltimore right now. You know, that's the risk you take. When they drafted him, they knew they had to revamp and rebuild their whole offense around him. Right. And it was very successful. He's totally unique and supremely talented player. And that MVP season, he was pretty much unstoppable because nobody knew, they were not prepared for his talent and his skill set. But they didn't win the Super Bowl. See, that's the problem. When you build around one guy, if they can take you to the Super Bowl, it makes sense. If it's Pat Mahomes and you've won 2 Super Bowls, you keep building around this guy. Mm-hmm. If teams start to figure him out and realize, like the Steelers, they rush him different than anybody else, and they keep him in there, and they make him throw it, and he does not have success against the Steelers that he has against everybody else because the Steelers see him twice a year. So do the Bengals, so do the Browns. You know, he is I think he's a good person. He's an incredible athlete. He's fun to watch. He is not an elite quarterback. He's an elite player. The problem is, can you win a Super Bowl with that? Because there is weaknesses that they have if they surround him with the talent to make him most effective. And the passing game's part of it. Now, him and Thomas they're dominant. I mean, Andrews, they're tight end. That's a dominant connection right there. But he's never had a dominant connection with a receiver. And therefore, that hurts them. And they bring in receivers, but it seems like the connection isn't there. So I think the whole problem for everybody in the NFL was Deshaun Watson and the Cleveland Browns. The Cleveland Browns signed the most insane contract the NFL's ever seen, fully guaranteed, overpaid to get a guy to come there. And now they got a problem. And everybody else, the other owners are like, nope, we're not going to do that. So now you see ESPN. See, Lamar Jackson doesn't have an agent because ESPN is these hype guys. They go on there and they're like, oh, it's racial or it's this or they don't want to. No, it's he has not won a Super Bowl. He's not come close. You do not know if you can win a quarterback win a Super Bowl with him playing quarterback at that style. So therefore, you don't want to pay him over $50 million a year, guaranteed, fully guaranteed. Because the Browns did it, doesn't mean that the other 31 teams need to line up and say, okay, we're just going to give all quarterbacks these monster contracts. That didn't set the bar. That's an outliner. And no smart franchise is going to follow that. So it's not that the NFL owners are freezing him out. that was an insane contract, and nobody's going to get that. And I mean, I know that now he wanted that from the Ravens, and now they're in a little bit of a yet another pissing contest. And if the Ravens are smart, and they've proven to be a very smart organization, they're not going to do that. So, you know, somebody said, well, today he wanted to be traded.
Yeah.
But, you know, who's going to say, I'm sure if he gets traded, he's going to be like, okay, now I want you to give me this contract. And,
for sure.
Yeah, and he is a very talented player, and he very well could win a Super Bowl in the right situation. But he needs to understand that the other guy's got to get paid too. And he needs to go somewhere that he feels welcome, he feels wanted, and just, you know, dig in and go out there and put the best performance he can out on the field. Because him doing all this, being his own agent, is distracted him, I think, from realizing what's really important and where his legacy lies. So the Ravens are in a no-win situation right at the moment.
Right. No, yeah, you're absolutely right. They're stuck having to hold the money for him, not being able to utilize it. They made a lot of cap space so that they can re-sign him, and he's not wanting to go back. And you know, he doesn't have an agent, but I don't think it's definitely the Watson thing, because Roquan Smith don't have an agent, and they were able to knock out a contract that paid him, you know, generational money. So that's not the thing. It's got to be the Watson thing. And I think it also has to do a little bit with the Russell Wilson trade. You know, you see what Denver paid him, also what they paid Seattle to acquire him. You know, the Ravens are going to want something similar. So, you know, he comes out and says, trade me. I know I was listening to one of the NFL talking heads earlier today, and they said that they can rework some stuff out or whatever and trade him out. And they don't have to acquire the 2 first-round picks. But you look at what Russell Wilson was worth, you can't kind of do that, right? And so I think that also plays a huge toll on his contract. There's like, all right, you know, not only do you have to pay you, but you also have to pay the Ravens a huge price tag to get him. And it's not worth it. It's not worth it, especially if other teams know that this guy does not want to be a member of the Baltimore Ravens anymore. You know, they're going to force that hand to get either, hey, we'll give you a small, you know, compensation, a 5th, 4th, 3rd round pick, or, you know, we'll wait until you cut him and not give you anything. And so, you know, the Ravens are in a, you know, between a rock and a hard place. I know John Harbaugh came out and said that he anticipates that Lamar Jackson's going to be the quarterback this season. But I mean, that's all he can say. He can't say anything different. I mean, if it ends up going down that way, he's going to look like a fool if he said something different. And so I'm enjoying it. I'm liking the turmoil, not just with them, but also, you know, the Browns going into their situation too with Deshaun Watson and having to pay him a buttload of money. I know they redid his contract, but they still got to pay it eventually. They ain't going to go anywhere. And so it looks like, to me, it's a funny situation. Another news that had occurred over the weekend was Ben Roethlisberger. He was on Mark Madden's show, talked a little bit about his career, talked about the ending of his career, talked about a possible return last season. He said that he was contacted by the 49ers, almost, you know, talked about it, prayed a lot about it, and talked to his agent and family, which means to me he at least considered it. What were your thoughts on Big Ben almost returning last season to be a member of the 49ers?
Well, now I'm as big fan as you're going to find. Ben Roethlisberger, I love Ben Roethlisberger, and he's, you know, I've said I would never have an all-time favorite player because there were so many stellar greats through my life that I put right there at the top, but I couldn't choose just one. Ben is my favorite player, which is something I never thought would happen, but it happened for lots of reasons. One, because of the beginning, I wanted him gone. I said if he, you know, assaulted a woman, or I want him out, you know, I just have no tolerance. And then to find out the full thing, and then his life changing, you know, I think he became a Christian and found his faith and his family. And I think he's turned his life around totally, because I think he was a total jerk in the beginning at the very least. So I guess because of how much that nobody's ever let him get past anything, and it, you know, affected him. He got no endorsements, even though he played for the most popular franchise in the world. NFL franchise with the largest fan base all across the world, the globe. He never got any endorsements like these other guys. Brady sells everything. I mean, it's hard to tell what he'll be selling tomorrow. But Ben couldn't get nothing. And so I guess that I never wanted to see Ben in another uniform. That being said, I'm glad he stayed with, said no. And the only uniform he'll ever wear is the black and gold. But part of me would have loved to have seen him with that monster roster, because the Eagles and the Niners had the two most complete rosters in the NFL last year. And the Niners, if Purdy hadn't got hurt in the championship game, they might have beat the Eagles because they had nobody after Purdy. After he went out, it was done. And Ben with that, because Ben had to become, because of the offensive line he played behind his last 2 years in Pittsburgh, he would have done great in that quick passing game, that West Coast style, feeding the ball to Samuels, feeding the ball to McCaffrey, all that talent that they have, Kettle. I think he would have really, I think he could have won a Super Bowl with them. But I'll be honest with you, and that's the selfish part of me as a Ben fan and a Steelers fan. I didn't want him to win a Super Bowl anywhere else. And I didn't want to see him in any other colors than black and gold. But I understand the Niners approaching him because it made a lot of sense. Because with his savvy, his experience, and his knowledge of playing the position on that roster, they would have definitely been a Super Bowl favorite, in my opinion.
No, I agree. I was, I first heard about it, I guess, during the season after Garoppolo got injured and they put in Purdy. Ben on his football and podcast came out and said that, he was talking about the 49ers stretching out his arm, things like that. I guess, that's what he was referring to when he said there was some truth to that, because he was kind of joking around with it. Now, I would have would have enjoyed watching him play again. He's also my favorite all-time player. I grew up for the last 18 years watching him play. So majority of what I've seen playing has been Ben Roethlisberger. Now, I've been a fan since before Ben. My earliest season that I can remember was 1993. And so, I remember some parts of the 90s, a lot of the early 2000s, a lot of Slash, a lot of Tommy Gunn, a lot of guys like that. And so Ben definitely by far is my favorite player. I don't know. I think I would have rooted for him. I think that's the only way you could have gotten me to root for a 49ers to win the Super Bowl was with Ben Roethlisberger as the quarterback. But I will also say this. This is twice now that there's been rumors of Ben and the 49ers, where the 49ers approached, trying to get Ben. Take that, Tom Brady, who's always wanted to play for the 49ers. They haven't approached you for some trading, so maybe, but not that's come out publicly outside of when they try to get Garoppolo, but this is twice for Ben. And so I would have liked to have seen it a little bit. I didn't think that Ben's career, I thought Ben's career in Pittsburgh was definitely at the end of it. There was no more, right? I thought maybe perhaps if he found the right situation with an offensive line that was proven and a defense that didn't force him to have to put up 30 points a game, that he would be a very successful quarterback. And, I would have hated to have seen him in different colors, but I think I would have liked to have rooted for him one more time, but it is what it is. And so, I'm glad he didn't also, because that would have been weird, man. Because I think they would have had a really good opportunity to make it to the Super Bowl, and that would have been just way too weird to try to root for the 49ers to win the Super Bowl. That would have been weird. But yeah, so the Steelers, moving forward, the quarterback position. Ben talked a little bit about Kenny. He said that he was. He surprised him, that he liked what he was able to do, especially towards the end of the season and the last parts of the games. He talked about the game-winning drive against Baltimore and against the Raiders. I thought that those were two huge drives for Kenny Pickett. There's been a lot of talk out there. I think it was Mel Kiper who said that he wouldn't choose Kenny Pickett. He'd be number 6 for him in this draft. What are your thoughts?
I've heard 5. I've heard a couple say 5 too, and I'm like,
what are your thoughts on that? You don't put no.
Oh, I think it's insulting to Kenny Pickett.
I do too.
Kenny Pickett, the offense he ran, and everybody keeps talking about he was. And because what the Steelers needed last year, once they developed that running game and once they started controlling the ball and the defense got healthy, they didn't understand that the one thing Pickett needed to do was protect the football. Move the ball and get points on the board. If it was 3, that's better than, having a lot of those drives were time of possession in the second half and in long sustained drives. That rested the defense and they were much more effective. It was a plan. And if you look at what they're doing this offseason, that's what they want next year too, guys. Pickett's not going to come out and start slinging it all over the field. Now, he might eventually become that. But we got to look at Pickett kind of like the Patriots did Brady. Starting out, Brady was the ultimate game manager. He was a winner, and he didn't lose games. Now, as time went on, and he got Randy Moss, and he got Gronk, and then he started earning out, putting up big numbers. But I think Pickett, the Steelers are wanting to bring him along slow, put him in a good position to grow. He obviously shows he has clutch ability. The guys, he has clutch. And that's something that a lot of quarterbacks don't have. And he did it 2 weeks in a row. And then, he really had a solid game against the Browns to close out the season. He didn't have to be clutch. But I like the plan moving forward. But saying that would be the 5th or 6th best quarterback out of this class, I think that time will prove that to be wrong. Because I think that Brian Young is I like him, but he's so small. It's like when Pat White come out of WVU and he come into the pros, all the talent in the world. First shot he took, Timmons hit him for the Steelers. Lamar Timmons hit him and put him out, and he never hardly played again. And White was bigger than Young. Young's 5'10" and like 190 normally. That's tiny for an NFL quarterback. I like C.J. Stroud. I think he's a really quality player. Anthony Richardson, come on. 1 solid year at Florida. He's a physical freak, but he can be more Jamarcus Russell than Cam Newton. So, if some team's if they take him in the first round, they're taking a huge leap of faith.
Right.
The Levis kid from Kentucky, he got a great fastball, but he has no off-speed stuff. No, everything is a rocket. And does he have touch? Can he anticipate? Can he lead? He hasn't proven that. So, to me, this year's class is even a bigger question mark than last year's was. Because I like Desmond Ridder, and I thought he was a real possibility for the Steelers in the second round. I didn't think the Steelers even had a shot at Kenny Pickett because I thought Pickett would come off the board much earlier to maybe a team like the Saints because I thought he was the perfect position to go to New Orleans, play in the Dome in that offense. I'm glad the Steelers got him. But I didn't even talk about Pickett last year because I didn't think he was a possibility. Yeah. But, there's some guys from that class last year who still haven't got a full opportunity. Sam Howell and I can't think of the guy from Ole Miss. I can't stand it when my mind goes blank. But
Corral.
There's some guys there that have some talent that I'd put up with a lot of these guys in this year's class. Like I said, Richardson's an athletic freak, but he's got 1 year, and he wasn't dominant. So, you're taking a leap of faith. And like I said, I like Brian Young a lot, but I worry about his size. The dude's tiny.
Yeah. Bryce Young, right? And
Bryce Young, not Brian Young.
Yeah, Bryce Young, he's a smaller guy.
Yeah.
You're right. When it comes to what, you're trying to project somebody of maybe, I would understand it if you're looking at what Kenny Pickett did in college compared to what these guys did in college, maybe. But what Kenny Pickett was able to prove to do last season, especially towards the end of the season. The second half of the season, the kid went 6-2. I think one of those games that they won was not him as a starter, so he was 6-2.
I thought he was 7-1. I know he lost to the Bengals.
Mm-hmm. And Baltimore because he was injured. Majority of that game was Trubisky, And
But I
so,
think but even that game that he lost to the Bengals, he had a good game.
no, yeah, he definitely did.
Yeah.
And so when you look at what he was able to do at the second half of the season, and he talks about, the problems that led to as to why they struggled early being the fact that one, he didn't even have a relationship with Matt Canada until he became a starter. They didn't even get to know each other until the Buffalo Bills game. I mean, that set of games that he was thrown into as a rookie, those first four, the Bills, Miami, Eagles, and Tampa Bay, those defenses at the time as well were top notch. He was going into it was a nightmare. And so, for him to turn it around after the bye and do what he was able to do, and then also show the clutch ability at the end of games, now it's time for him to get a full off season, get a full training camp under his belt, have that relationship with Matt Canada, be able to build and grow within this team. And now that they're able to put also these pieces in the front offensive line to give him some time for plays to develop, and also not having to potentially, let's just say they are able to leave their tackles on an island and they're able to win more of those situations. Well, then that would allow more passing options further down the field and for more of an imaginative offense that they can use. And so you're not utilizing one of your passing targets to block, right? And so I think that these moves that the Steelers are making, as small as they are, they're really big. And when you look at the overall scheme of things, a lot of folks were kind of disappointed in the first day of free agency or the tampering period that the Steelers didn't go out there and make a big splash. There wasn't a Terrell Edmonds signing, all these things. And, the first one off the board was Patrick Peterson. And everybody's like, you lost Cam Sutton, you're gaining somebody older, not realizing that this guy also he could play the safety position. He's already talked with Coach Tomlin about playing the safety position. So he's also going to mentor the new guy, the future, the potential CB1 that they're going to have later on down the line. Those puzzle pieces start to clear up. And I think the Steelers are going to be, they're doing a pretty good job so far. And I'm excited for what they're going to do in the draft. I think it's going to be, not the most glamorous draft because you're not seeing a skill position, being drafted top. I think we're going to see an offensive tackle off the board first. And that's not the glamour pick that everybody wants. Everybody wants a receiver or somebody that's going to put up points. But sometimes, you need socks and underwear for Christmas instead of that bike. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
And so sometimes it's the necessities. And I think that's what we're going at right now.
I love your mindset there. And it makes me think of something. When you look at Ben Roethlisberger, he's going to be a Hall of Famer, no doubt. One of the top quarterbacks of all time. He was unique. I put him in a category with John Elway and Brett Favre. Those guys had the talent to play in any system. They had the intelligence. They had the talent. Most guys, you get them in the right system. Joe Montana, one of the best quarterbacks I ever saw. He was West Coast. You put him in the Steelers system, he wouldn't have been good. You put Peyton Manning in the Steelers system, Tom Brady. Them guys that have got killed behind the lines Ben played with. We know this. So, but when you look at Ben Roethlisberger, he was never considered a top 3 quarterback. He was always 4th, 5th, 6th. That's where people put him. When we talk about Kenny Pickett, let's keep that in mind. You want a winner. What matters is winning the Super Bowl. I don't care if the guy wins an MVP. Ben never won an MVP. He was the most valuable Steeler. And, but it doesn't have to be MVP. We know Lamar Jackson won an MVP, but I don't think he'll ever win a Super Bowl. You want a guy capable of getting you to the top and winning the game. And I believe Kenny Pickett proves that in his clutchness. And we understand that as the season went on, we realized what Tomlin wanted. Ball security, ball control. That's what he preached every week. And it worked. And they had a successful second half of the season after they looked really bad in that first half. So what we got to remember is Kenny Pickett might not never be an MVP. He might not never be what people were saying, the top 3 quarterback in the league. But I don't care. What I want's a winner. And I want a guy who can get buy into the system and win you ball games. Tom Brady ain't the most talented quarterback I ever walked the planet, but he won the most Super Bowls, and now he's the GOAT. So that's what I'm saying. Let Kenny Pickett develop. I'm not saying he's the franchise guy. We don't know. But I think he deserved a second look.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, I think that's a no-brainer. And people who are wanting I've even seen some people say, "Oh, Steelers might not have look at this guy or that guy in this year's draft." No. I mean, when you look at the makeup of this team, they're building a team that Kenny Pickett can be successful leading. And that starts with the offensive line. Now we're going to look for some defensive line. We're going to build up. That's how smart teams do it. And that's why I was kind of actually rooting for the Eagles to win the Super Bowl because, they had a complete roster. But then what showed up in the Super Bowl, Kansas City had a complete roster too. I didn't realize that they had the roster they did because that Super Bowl, Mahomes didn't light that up. He didn't have a massive game. He hit two guys that was wide open for two little touchdowns down around the goal line. But they won that game because they was a complete team too.
Yeah.
And they made one less mistake than the Eagles made. So I can see the Steelers building that around Pickett and winning a Super Bowl somewhere down the road.
I agree. And I think that they're going to be in contention for that Super Bowl a lot sooner than we think. I think that this jump, especially for Kenny Pickett, like I was mentioning earlier, and, all the context that goes along with it, with the training camp and being, the starter from here forward, no questions, no split reps, things like that. That's only going to benefit him and this team. And we're only seeing the tip of the iceberg of what this team could be. It's all working underneath right now, and it'll come together. And another thing is, we also got to remember is health plays a huge part in success.
Mm-hmm.
And so, last year the Steelers almost made the playoffs without TJ Watt for half the season. And I guarantee they made the playoffs had he been there the full year. And so, he's not a quarterback. He's not a quarterback, right? So it's not always just a quarterback too. It's a full team effort. It's a 53-man, operation when it comes to putting up a championship because it takes up every player and they all have to be on the same page.
But I know you're noticing what Con and Waddle's doing. They're putting depth there, guys.
Oh yeah,
they're building that depth and across the roster, and I'm expecting it in the defensive line as we talked about, and corner and a safety. But that offensive line, because, usually you don't make it through a whole season with the same starting five like the Steelers did last year. Right. So they're already strengthening the depth. And, like you said, that is how championships are won now. Yeah.
No, you're absolutely right. Especially with the depth that those teams had on the line. That's where it's helpful. And you're right. The Steelers, there's no way that they're going to go another year like that without – with your full offensive line going uninjured. That's hopefully, let's knock on wood. Let's hope that happens. But, to expect that would be unrealistic. We're getting a little bit long here. Do you have anything coming up that you want to throw out there before we let everybody go?
Like I said, I just have the second part two of the how the Steelers can upgrade the inside linebacker position. The first article is about the free agency, which is kind of winding down. There's still some values out there. There'll still be some signings, but this part, now that you got a clearer picture of what the Steelers need to do. This part is about the people, the best prospects and the best fits that they can target in this inside linebacker draft class. And that should hopefully, I guess, maybe Wednesday be hitting. And so hopefully it'll be as successful as the first one.
Awesome, man. I'll be looking forward to reading that. Hopefully it'll be a good one. For me, guys, I just did on the audio side only, Steel Curtain Network. Go check out Saturday's State of the Steelers. I was talking about the unexpected changes that have occurred this offseason up to this point. And I'll have another podcast out this upcoming Saturday. With that being said, that'll be all for us. Shannon, take us out. Woo!